All right, let's jump into another deep dive.
Hmm.
Um, Today we're kind of going into a legal battleground, a real-life case. And, well, it's got twists and turns, just like a courtroom drama. We're going to unpack all the complexities, the legal arguments, and the consequences for all the people involved.
Definitely. We're going to break it all down so you can follow each and every move in this legal chess match.
Perfect. So let's set the scene. Our story is about Jagratin, a former army man who ended up joining the Directorate of Cooperatives and Panchayat Audit in Uttar Pradesh, India. Sounds like a pretty standard career move, right?
It does.
Well, things took a bit of a turn. He's saying he's been repeatedly targeted with all these disciplinary actions, like suspensions and penalties.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. The core of his argument is that these actions aren't actually about his performance, but they're retaliation for something he did.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Sure.
What exactly is Jagratin accusing the department of?
Well, he's saying he's being punished for whistleblowing, for exposing corruption in the department. He filed complaints all the way back in 2018, alleging some serious financial misdeeds and potentially fraudulent activities.
So he's saying he tried to do the right thing to hold people accountable, and they're coming after him for it.
That's exactly his claim. Now, the department has actually come back with some pretty serious accusations of their own. They've hit Jagratin with 4 charges.
4 charges. Wow. Okay, let's get into those charges.
Yeah.
What are they specifically accusing him of?
Well, the first charge is a bit of a bombshell. Jagratin filed a complaint alleging a complete breakdown of law and order in the Meerut district office. He even went as far as accusing officers of conspiring against him and threatening his life.
Whoa, that escalated things quickly.
Huh.
He definitely sounds like he was seriously concerned for his safety.
Absolutely. Now, charges 2, 3, and 4 all have to do with Jagratin's actual work as an auditor. So they claim that he conducted what are called re-audits and other audits without the right authorization or without following the established procedures. They're also saying that he actually received a salary for the periods when he was conducting these unauthorized audits.
So they're basically saying he was going rogue, doing his own thing, and getting paid for it.
Yeah, that's the department's position. They're arguing that he overstepped his authority and didn't follow the rules. But it's important to remember that these are just accusations. We need to really look at the evidence and hear both sides of the story before we make any judgments.
You're right, innocent until proven guilty. These charges, especially that first one, really paint a dramatic picture. Sounds like there's a lot of tension and distrust between Jagratin and the department. What does Jagratin say about these charges? How's he defending himself?
Well, he's sticking to his guns. He's adamant that all these charges are just a smokescreen, a way to silence him and punish him for whistleblowing. He claims he was very meticulous in his work and that any audits he conducted were absolutely necessary to actually uncover the corruption that he was seeing.
Okay, so we have a classic he said, she said situation. But this isn't just about, conflicting accounts. It's about the law. Is there any legal precedent for this kind of situation? Has something like this happened before?
There actually is. There's a landmark case in India that's incredibly relevant here. It's the 2013 Ramesh Kumaraswamy case. In that case, the Supreme Court actually upheld the right of government employees to file complaints against their superiors, even if those complaints allege corruption.
So the highest court in India has already ruled that government employees have a right to blow the whistle, even if it means going after those in power.
Exactly. They recognize the crucial role whistleblowers play in exposing all this wrongdoing. They essentially said you can't punish someone for speaking out against corruption, even if it makes powerful people uncomfortable.
That's a big win for accountability. It sounds like Jagratin's lawyers could really use this case to their advantage.
Oh, absolutely. They can definitely argue that Jagratin, just like Ramesh Kumaraswamy, was simply exercising his right to report this corruption, and any attempt to punish him for that is unlawful.
That's a really strong legal argument. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to the department side of things. If the charges are really about these unauthorized audits, wouldn't they have a legitimate case? I mean, don't government employees have to follow procedure?
They absolutely do. You're right. And the department could definitely argue that even if Jagratin's whistleblowing was legitimate, that doesn't mean he can just disregard all the departmental procedures. They could say, we're not punishing him for whistleblowing. We're punishing him for breaking the rules, for conducting these audits without proper authorization.
So the department's strategy could be to zero in on those procedural violations and really try to separate those actions from his whistleblowing.
Exactly. They'll likely try to downplay the whistleblowing and portray him as someone who is freelancing and acting outside of his authority.
This is getting interesting. It really seems like the case could come down to whether the court believes Jagratin was truly acting outside the rules or if they see these charges as a form of retaliation.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It all boils down to the court's interpretation of the evidence and their assessment of the department's motivations. All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into this Jagratan case. Last time, we laid out the accusations against him, his claims of whistleblowing, and of course that crucial Ramesh Kumaraswamy case that could really help his defense.
Yeah, it's like a legal thriller. We've got accusations going back and forth and a major Supreme Court ruling hanging in the balance. But before we get too lost into the bigger picture, let's zoom in on some of the details. The department is saying that Jagratan broke some specific rules when he was conducting those audits. What exactly are those rules, and how do they work?
You're right. We do need to get into those nitty-gritty details. So the key piece of legislation in this case is this, it's called the UP Government Servant Discipline and Appeal Rules, and it's from 1999. Think of it as the rule book for actually disciplining government employees in Uttar Pradesh.
So like an employee handbook.
Yeah.
But with actual legal teeth.
Exactly. These rules lay out some very, very specific procedures for things like conducting departmental inquiries and imposing disciplinary actions. Jagratan's lawyers are arguing that the department essentially ignored this rulebook when they went after him.
Okay, so give us an example. How do these rules actually protect someone like Jagratan?
Well, remember how Jagratan only got a copy of that second inquiry report after he actually filed a right to information request?
Right.
That delayed access to all that information is a major, major red flag. These 1999 rules guarantee the right to a fair hearing, which actually includes having a reasonable amount of time to review evidence and prepare a solid defense. So by withholding that report, it's possible that they actually violated his rights.
Yeah, it's like trying to fight a battle, but you're blindfolded. You just don't know what you're up against.
Exactly. And there are also other safeguards that are built into these rules. Like, for example, there are some specific provisions about what actually needs to be in a charge sheet, how long an employee actually has to respond to accusations, and, of course, their right to present evidence in their defense. Jagratan's team is arguing that the department cut corners basically every step of the way, denying him a fair chance to clear his name.
So they're building a case that the whole process was rigged against him. That it wasn't really about upholding departmental rules, but it was a way to target him for actually speaking out.
That's exactly the heart of their argument. But remember, there's another layer to this legal situation. They're not just alleging violations of these departmental rules, but they're also claiming that Jagratan's constitutional rights were violated as well.
Hold on a second. Constitutional rights. How do those even come into play in a case about, departmental discipline?
This is where things get really, really interesting. The Indian Constitution guarantees certain fundamental rights to everyone. And those rights don't just disappear because you're a government employee.
Okay, so which specific rights are we talking about here?
So Jagratan's lawyers are focusing on Articles 14, 16, and 21 of the Indian Constitution. Article 14 guarantees equality before the law, while Article 16 ensures equality of opportunity when it comes to public employment.
So they're saying that if he was unfairly targeted because he blew the whistle, that would essentially violate his right to be treated equally under the law, especially in his job.
You got it. And they're not stopping there. They're also bringing up Article 21, which protects the right to life and personal liberty. So their argument is that this prolonged suspension, the mental anguish he's going through from these repeated inquiries, and the damage to his reputation could all be seen as infringements on his personal liberty.
Wow, they're pulling out all the stops. It's amazing how this whole case has gone from what seemed like a straightforward disciplinary action to this battle over fundamental rights.
That's what's so fascinating about legal cases. They can have these ripple effects touching upon these big principles of justice and fairness.
Okay, so we've got these two main pillars of Jagratan's defense. Violations of departmental rules and these potential violations of his constitutional rights. It's a multi-pronged attack. But let's not forget about the department. They have their own arguments. They're saying that these charges are totally legitimate and that Jagratan really did break the rules. So what's their strongest argument in all of this?
Well, their strongest argument is probably going to be, hey, rules are rules,
Right.
They'll probably say that no matter what his reasons were, Jagratan went outside the boundaries of his authority when he did those unauthorized audits.
So their defense is basically, we're not punishing him for whistleblowing, we're punishing him for not doing things by the book.
Exactly. And that's not a weak argument, Government departments need to maintain some sense of order. They need to make sure everyone's following procedures. Their argument is going to be that if you let employees just go rogue, even if it's for good reasons, it'll create chaos.
Yeah, that's a valid point. But wouldn't Jagratan's lawyers say that those two inquiries that cleared him show that there's more to this story?
Absolutely. They'll probably argue that those initial findings that he was innocent are evidence that the department was kind of grasping at straws, trying to find anything at all to use against him, because they just weren't happy about his whistleblowing.
So it all comes back to that question of motivation. Was Jagratan disciplined because he actually messed up the procedure? Or was it all about getting back at him for exposing this corruption?
You got it. The court's going to have to look at all the evidence, weigh the legal arguments, and ultimately decide which side of the story they believe.
It's like a big legal puzzle. We've got conflicting stories, procedural questions, constitutional arguments, and then this big question of their motivations just hanging over everything. What do you think is the most important piece of this puzzle? What could make or break Jagratan's case?
You know what's really fascinating here is that Jagratan's team is trying to connect his case to this broader pattern of behavior within the whole department. Remember that the High Court, in a separate but related case, made some pretty harsh observations about certain officers' integrity within the same department that's going after Jagratan.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that before. So they're trying to say that this isn't just a one-time thing, that there's a history of questionable stuff going on in the department.
Exactly. If they can convince the court that this is a pattern of misconduct, of targeting people who speak up, it could really hurt the department's credibility. And it would definitely support Jagratan's claim that they were out to get him.
That's a really smart legal strategy. It's like they're saying, look, this isn't just about Jagratan. It's about a bigger problem within the entire department.
Exactly. They're trying to paint a bigger picture to show that his case is just one part of a much larger problem.
Okay, so we're back for the final act of this legal drama. We've been through all the twists and turns of Jagratan's case, from those misconduct accusations to claims of whistleblowing to departmental rule books and even constitutional rights. It's been quite the journey.
It really has, and like any good drama, we're waiting to see how it all ends.
Exactly. So let's get to it. Jagratan's case is now in the hands of the High Court. They have to make sense of all the evidence, the legal arguments, and those conflicting accounts. Yeah. What could possibly happen here?
Well, let's start with what would happen if the court rules in Jagratan's favor. They could decide that all those disciplinary actions against him weren't fair, basically saying his claims of retaliation were right.
That would be a huge win for him. What would that actually look like? What kind of, relief could he get?
Well, the court could overturn all those penalties they put on him. They might even order him to be fully reinstated to his old position. And they might even go further. They could tell the department to pay him back for all the wages and benefits he lost.
So he could get his job back, his reputation cleared, and even get financial compensation for all the trouble he's been through.
It's a real possibility. And there's even more. The court could tell the department to investigate everyone who was involved in that alleged harassment and even take action against them.
That would be a powerful statement. It would show that there are real consequences for going after whistleblowers.
Absolutely. It would set a precedent, you know, making other government departments think twice before they try to silence employees who speak out against wrongdoing.
So a win for Jagratan could have a ripple effect, making other whistleblowers feel braver and strengthening accountability in the government. But let's look at the other side. What if the court decides to side with the department? What happens to Jagratan if he loses?
If the court says those disciplinary actions were okay, it would be a huge setback for Jagratan. He'd probably lose his job, face some financial struggles, and have this mark on his record.
That's rough.
Yeah.
Sounds like the stakes are incredibly high.
They really are, and there's a bigger picture to think about, too. If the court goes with the department, it could make other people afraid to whistleblow. Other government employees might not want to report wrongdoing because they're scared of facing the same kind of retaliation.
It's like a domino effect. A loss for Jagratan could scare people into staying silent, even when they know something's wrong.
That's a real concern. The outcome of this case could send a signal to everyone else. Will they be protected if they speak up, or will they be punished?
This is where it becomes more than just one guy's case. It's about the fight against corruption and how we protect the people who are brave enough to expose it.
Exactly. This case highlights how important whistleblowers are. They hold these powerful institutions accountable.
It reminds us that speaking truth to power isn't easy, and it often comes with a personal price.
But even if Jagratan doesn't win, his willingness to fight, to challenge the system, is a big deal.
It takes courage, and it might inspire others to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
And no matter what the court decides, this case has gotten people talking about whistleblowing, accountability, and whether we need stronger legal protections.
It's a conversation we need to keep having. Cases like this one force us to ask those uncomfortable questions about how we protect the people who expose wrongdoing and how we make sure that powerful groups are held accountable.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I think the thing for our listeners to remember is this. Pay attention to these cases. They might seem like isolated incidents, but they show us where the system is broken and they get us talking about justice and fairness.
Even if you're not a lawyer, you can still do something. Support groups that help whistleblowers, learn about your own rights, and speak up against corruption when you see it.
Because in the end, we all want a more just and transparent society. It's something we all have to fight for.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Jagradni's case. We'll definitely keep an eye on it and let you know what happens. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions.